Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, and this episode, it's going in the Strategy Talks and Mechanics Guide series, but it's not really a strategy talk or mechanics guide, it's just a bunch of random things that I've noticed. um, as I've done a lot of math behind this game, and as I've spent a lot of time in X, I've noticed a lot of fun facts, I guess, that aren't really necessarily useful for gameplay in any particular way, but are just interesting to know. So I wanted to just make this video and talk about it, and just share all these random facts. So get ready, there's a lot of them. And I'm just going to start reading them all off. I've written them down in my notes, so let's get going with this. So, there are people who have meganiums that have leaks at their level 30 proc that were possible for a short period of time as a bug, which are interestingly the only non-ingredient Pokemon in the game that have leaks available before level 60. The fastest non-legendary base frequency in the game is 2,200 seconds, in which we have one berry Pokemon that is the fastest, being Raichu, one ingredient Pokemon being the fastest, which is Gengar, and one skills Pokemon that is the fastest, being Jolteon. Slowpoke is currently the only branching evolutionary line that doesn't have a difference in main skill on its evolutions, unless you are counting for Glaceon and Flareon, but there are a lot more evolutions, so I didn't count it. Of the 9 generations that are released as of the time of making this video, the generation that got representation the latest in Pokemon Sleep was Generation 5, with the addition of Rufflet and Braviary in January of 2025, nearly a year and a half after the game's initial release. The second latest generation was Gen 9, which got representation with the Paldean starters during the 1-year anniversary event. So there was almost a 6-month gap between the release of the Gen 9 starters and Braviary. Then, the only meal type that is missing an entire ingredient, so from all of its meals, is desserts. And it's not just missing one ingredient, it's missing 3. Being herbs, sausage, and tails. You can go check, but there are no desserts that contain herbs, sausage, or tails. Yet, milk is in 13 of the 24 available desserts, which is more than half of them. Apples are also in a significant amount as well. Bulk Up Bean Curry is weaker than Spore Mushroom Curry in base strength, despite taking a wider variety of ingredients, taking more ingredients, and having a higher percent value boost from the base strength of the meal. The same can also be said for Dazzling Apple Cheese Salad compared to Immunity Leek Salad. The highest value single berry proc in the game would be from a level 60 berry finding S Altaria at Greengrass Island with favored Yachi berries, with a 75% island boost. The value of this single proc of berries would be 1,575 Snorlax strength, which is more value than a level 5 main skill, fixed charge strength S skill proc without any island boost. When collecting your daily gift, more than half of the time, you will either be getting diamonds or Pokebiscuits. It takes more than double the Drowsy power to get 7 spawns at the Old Gold Power Plant than it takes to get 8 spawns at Greengrass. Leveling your pot size from 60 to 69 ingredients costs more Dream Shards than leveling your pot size from 15 to 60 ingredients. For all the starters currently in the game, the Grass Starter final form is the same speed as its shared Water Starter, but its pre-evos of the Grass Starter are always faster than the equivalent stage in the Water Starter's line. Additionally, the fire starter for all three trios is faster than the equivalent stage of both the grass and water starters at all three levels of its evolution, with the notable exception of Skeledirge and Skeledirge alone, who for some reason is slower than its fellow Paldean starters, despite his pre-evolutions being faster than their evolutionary equivalents, and he also has a weaker berry, being Ghost Berry, which is only 26 base value, compared to the Fire Berry that he had before evolving, which was 27 value. Usually in the game, when something is adjusted in frequency, it's to balance for a stronger berry type, but in this case, that was not the case. As to why, it would only be assumptions as to why Skeledirge does not follow that pattern that the other two generations of starters do. Berries in this game range in base strength from 24 to 35, but despite every number having at least one berry associated with it, and some numbers having more than one berry associated with it, with 26 strength actually having 3 separate berries that have 26 strength, being Ghost, Fairy, and Psychic berries. Even though that is the case, there are no berries that exist with 34 strength. There is a random gap right at the end of the strength curve for the berry types. Tails provide more value as filler in a dish than any 2 other ingredients in the game aside from leeks, which leeks provide more value than 2 apples as filler. The highest base ingredient rate in the game isn't even on an ingredient specialist. It is on Slacking, who has a 33.9% ingredient rate. If you have a Slacking that has just ingredient finding M and ingredient finding S in the subskills, it will be finding ingredients more often than it will be finding berries. This is the only Pokemon in the game that this is a possibility for without an ingredient finding up nature. The first Pokemon to be added to the game that wasn't in the game at launch was Mr. Mime and Mime Jr. It was our first island exclusive Mon to Cyan, a title that has now been ripped away from it since it now also appears at the Old Gold Power Plant. Its release date was September 11th of 2023, and since losing the status of Cyan exclusive, Cyan Beach is now the only non-Greengrass island that has no island exclusives. Braviary was released on the US presidential inauguration day. That was definitely just a coincidence. The devs of this country, or the devs of this game, are a Japanese company, but I still think it's funny and wanted to mention it. Despite popular belief, Golduck does not actually have the highest skill trigger rate in the game. That title goes to its pre-evolution Psyduck, who beats it by just 0.1%. At one point in time, Umbreon had the highest skill trigger rate in the game, but when they buffed its main skill to be Moonlight instead of just Energizing Cheer S, or not Energizing Cheer, the self-recharge ability, they nerfed its trigger rate a little bit. Nowadays, it isn't even the top 3 out of all Pokemon in the game for skill trigger rate, being lower than Psyduck, Golduck, and even Wobbuffet, who overtook it with its relatively recent buff. Almost every type in the game has a sleep type that is correlated with it, but many examples have exceptions. Typically speaking, Bug, Grass, Poison, Dark, Ghost, and Dragon types are dozing. We usually see that Water, Rock, Flying, Ice, Steel, and Fighting types are slumbering, and then Normal, Fire, Fairy, Electric, and Psychic types are typically snoozing. However, there's one type that I left out of that list. That is because that type is Ground. Ground type only has 2 Pokemon evolutionary lines in the game, and they both have a different sleep type. Marowak, who is slumbering, and Dugtrio, who is snoozing. We cannot say for sure which one of them is following the rule and which one is breaking it. Many players assume that it would be snoozing, however, because then every sleep type would have 6 Pokemon types associated with it for the sake of balancing the styles. All baby Pokemon in the game, no matter their typing, are slumbering sleep type. There are no single stage berry Pokemon currently in the game, despite them being the Pokemon that suffer the least from getting caught fully evolved. There are more skills Pokemon in the game than ingredient Pokemon, and more ingredient Pokemon than berry Pokemon. The Pity-Proc help count for every non-skills Pokemon in the game, while skills mons have a varying amount depending upon their frequency. Typically, the number that for their Pity-Proc help count is what you would get if you divide 144,000 by their base frequency of that species in seconds. There are a few exceptions to this rule. Well, and then round, obviously, because you're going to get a decimal with that. So 144,000 divided by their base frequency in seconds, and then round it to the nearest whole number. The few exceptions to this rule, though, are there are 2 Pokemon, 2 skill specialists, that have a Pity-Proc help count that is 1 higher than this formula would suggest, those being Gulpin and Growlithe. And then here is a list of Pokemon that have a Pity-Proc help count 1 lower than the formula would suggest. That is Wigglytuff, Holiday Hat Pikachu, Mimikyu, Dedenne, Drifblim, Ampharos, Arcanine, Heracross, Cresselia, and Raikou. Even though 2800 is the most common base frequency in the game, and skill specialists are the most common specialty in the game, there is only 1 skill specialist with 2800 base frequency in the game, that being Persian. Since the game's release, we have had a few events that have recurred. While they may have changed some minor things about these events each time, they generally have followed the same structure both times they have happened. But there was one notable exception. The first New Year's Eve event was a 1-week event that looked a lot more similar to the modern day growth weeks. But the second New Year's Eve event was our first recurring event to undergo a massive overhaul, transforming it into a 2-week long event with an event shop that was unrecognizable from the New Year's Eve event the year before. 1-star Vikavolt and 1-star Entei have the same drowsy power requirement, and 4-star Vikavolt has the same drowsy power requirement as a 3-star Raikou, meaning that Vikavolt is just as expensive on your drowsy power to spawn as legendary Pokemon. Gen 8, to this day, has the least amount of representation in this game. The only Gen 8 Pokemon in the game is Cramorant. The Gulping Bird is the entire representation of Galar in Pokemon Sleep as of right now. Gen 6 is not too far behind it, with only 2 Pokemon being in the game, just Dedenne and Sylveon, both of which in the base games would be fairy types, but Dedenne in this game, as we know, is an electric type. Alrighty, well that is all the random facts that I had for you today. If you have enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Down in the description, I'll have a link to join the Discord. Come hang out, talk about all things Pokemon Sleep and the like. Love to have more people in that cool community, talking, chilling, hanging out. I also recently added the join button. Feel free to click that if you feel like you are financially able to and wanting to support me in that way. I have no paywalled content, but I have that as an option if you just like what I'm doing and want to show me that kind of support. And as always, I thank you all for watching and hope that you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.